Tonight's program sponsor is PECA. PECA now delivering more with HEA. We have a long and storied history going back to the Vision West days. Did you know that they've given over $12 million just to COA? So they support programs like this. They're one of the main reasons why we haven't had a dues increase in almost 20 years. So thank you, PECA. Really appreciate your support. Tonight, we're going to be talking, oops, sorry about that. Stopping sharing now. We're going to be talking about opening colds. So we've got, I'll say the experts. She's helped over 500 doctors like you purchase practices. So we won't talk about checklists or spreadsheets or tips about finding a location. It's really about why are some practices successful and some aren't able to stay afloat. Well, she has the answer. So she is Jenny Wiley, the Director of Member Experience with PECA. Jenny has spent 27 years as a certified ophthalmic technician, including 20 of those as a manager in academic and private practice settings. She comes to us with almost 35 years of experience. Started with PECA in 2015. And like I said, hundreds of doctors she's helped along this road. So Jenny loves bourbon, beer, Maryland Terrapins, Ravens, and supporting doctors and students like you. So cheers to you, Jenny. You are up.
Thank you. Okay, so can you see my correct screen, Jody?
Looks great.
Hot diggity, and you can hear me. You guys can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. All right, now my first question is, how come myself, Jody, and Dr. Chung are the only one whose faces you can see?
Come
on, guys.
You guys are the important ones.
Well, okay, so it's 9:30, 9:45 Eastern time where I am. And if I can show my face, you can show yours. So
I'm eating dinner right now. You don't want to see my face.
All right, well, please feel free to share your cameras. I don't care if you are eating. I don't care if you're working or answering emails, whatever the case may be. I think it's more fun when we can actually see each other. So Jody, thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. Sometimes when people say out loud how long I've been doing this, it freaks me out a little bit. It feels like a much shorter period of time than 35 years. And it's been an incredible journey. And I am very, very fortunate to do what I do every single day. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me this evening and for dedicating part of your day to either further exploring, or maybe for some of you beginning the exploration around the opportunity to open your own practice. And my hope is really that you will leave this evening with maybe a concept you've not yet considered, or perhaps an alternate way of approaching the opening process. So I know that Jody mentioned talking a lot about not providing checklists and timelines and talking about why businesses some are more successful than others. And I don't want you to feel like this is going to be a downer of a webinar that you're going to think, man, yeah, that sounds awesome. I just want to talk about how people fail. That sounds like a great way to wrap up my Thursday night after a long day in clinic. That's actually not what we're going to do, but we are going to talk about some of the key differences that you see in people who have thriving practices and those who kind of take a little bit longer to get that ball rolling, if you will. So when I think about my career, you will see that a lot of that 34, 35 years has been spent directly in patient care with patients in the exam room, 27 years as a COT. But I also spent an awful lot of time on the back end working for the patient, if you will. So maybe indirectly on the back end to improve systems, develop processes, and build stronger teams. And the belief for me has always been that that is in an effort to improve the patient's overall experience in our practice. And when I stepped away from direct patient care, I really had a moment where I thought, what is this going to look like for me? Everything I've done every day for the last 27 years has been with patients sitting in front of me. Am I still going to be able to have an impact? Am I still going to be able to provide useful information to doctors in order to be able to improve the experiences that their patients have. And what I have certainly learned by working with the new practices, and some of these are brand new, right out of school, hot to trot, I'm going to open my doors. Some of them are, and I refer to those as new news. And then I also work with a number of people who acquire practices. So it might be that the practice has been established for a period of time and that person steps in and purchases the practice. Either way, I kind of look at working with those practices and working with doctors on the operational side very much the same as what I did working with patients one-on-one, because what I have learned is that if we can help you become better business owners, it takes a little bit of the pressure off. You step into your exam room fully and immersed in that patient experience with your patient. So when you're a better business owner, I think it can equate quite easily to happier patients for you. So I would love for us, if you wouldn't mind, just very briefly, those who are eating, those who are not, whatever it is that you're doing, to let me know in the chat box really quickly, kind of what your status is. I know that everybody is here for the same general reason. But I also know, based on the registration sheet that I received, that everybody is kind of in a different space in this journey. There are a lot of stops on the journey to practice ownership. So if you would just really quickly drop in an A, B, C, or D, it would be greatly appreciated. That's all you need to do. And that'll just kind of give everybody an idea of who's here and what we're doing tonight. I'm going to pull up the chat box real quick. Yes, Dr. Chung, thank you. Turn your cameras on. All right, we've got a lot of A's, more A's. I've got one person opening soon, more A's, an opening soon. And I have a couple of folks who have been open for more than a year. And I know there's someone in here who's been open for more than a year, but he didn't drop his answer in there. So we've got a few of you, but it looks like most are kind of in the beginning stages. And then there are a handful who are in the process of opening soon. So thank you so much for sharing that information with me. I greatly appreciate it. So before we get started, talking about kind of the ins and outs and the nitty gritty, I want you to take a really brief moment before we start to celebrate this step right here. And I'll explain that for you, because deciding to attend this evening is kind of a big deal, especially for those of you who selected A and are just kind of starting to feel things out and think about what this is going to look like. So whether or not you're already open or you're in that discovery phase, making a choice to be here after you've worked all day means you're ready to learn more, or maybe challenge some of the things that you already know. Maybe it's to let go of those closely held assumptions about the right or the wrong way to do this, because I'm here to tell you, I don't think there is a right or a wrong way. Don't let that throw you for a loop. I think that, of course, there are processes and steps that have to be taken along the way. But one of the most valuable things that I have learned over the last 6.5 years is that nobody goes through this process the same way. Nobody has the exact same pain points. Nobody opens their doors exactly like somebody else. Nobody walks through their clinic day and processes and their clinic flow exactly the same. This is your journey and your experience. So in that way, I don't think there is a right or a wrong way to walk through this. The only way that matters is your way. And yes, insight from your colleagues can be absolutely invaluable. What I will caution you against, after spending some of my own time on certain Facebook groups, just be careful about following the rule of all the experts that are on social media. Remember, they have different practices than you do. Their ideas about their practices are different than yours. So it's great to gather the information, but again, remember, this is your story to write. And so what's funny about all of that and all of the things that we talk about and people who don't do well and those who fail is that starting a business really isn't the hard part. There are tons of resources available for you as doctors and for you as new business owners. There are organizations that do nothing but focus solely on helping startups. And I will make sure to provide a list of those at the end. So there will be a slide at the end that gives a little bit of detail about that. There are, in your local cities and communities, your city governments often have economic development departments. They are interested in bringing new businesses into their towns, and they're there to help you figure out how to do that. We have colleagues, we have mentors, folks that you don't know are always ready to give you advice. Advice is endless, it's plentiful, and oftentimes it's actually good and useful advice. The support is yours to be had. I got a lot of questions about buying groups and alliance groups, and I'm happy to step into those a little bit further as we get closer to the end. But there are a lot of options in that space for you as well. There are consultants, alliance groups, buying groups, your accountants, lawyers, other business owners. The resources and the number of things that are available to you to help you start the business is not the hard part. So now you're thinking, okay, so what is the hard part? Well, unfortunately, it's everything else. Everything else, also known as making it work, is the hard part. All of the little pieces that go into making this successful and making it work, that's what's hard. Your to-do list will never end. You will cross off one thing and you will add something to it. And to-do lists, at least in my world, they just act as one big shiny distraction. And when you are starting off, that list of things you think you need to do can keep you from taking meaningful action or focusing on what actually can make a difference for your practice. I have this terrible habit every time I pull up my Outlook. I think, you know what I'm gonna do today? It's really important, even though I've got a to-do list. I'm gonna clean out my contact list. I don't talk to some of these people anymore. I'm just gonna go ahead and spend half of my morning cleaning out my contact list. I know there's someone else on here who has, within the last couple of days, thought, man, I really need to clean out my contact list. Or I have 1,284 emails in my Gmail. I should probably really try to do something about that. So, and I realize, right, we want to tackle those things, but there aren't the things that we need to be tackling right now. Your contact list does not need to be cleaned up, and your ducks will actually never be in a row. And for how many times people say to me, I'm going to wait until everything's right. It's like when people have kids. I'm going to wait till the time is right. There's no actual time that it's right. I have people tell me, I'm going to get my kids through the stage that they're in, and then I'm going to open. Anyone who has kids, myself included, knows that there's usually a stage after the stage that they're in, and then there's usually a stage after that stage. There's never going to be an ideal, perfect, right time to take this leap. So what I'd like to do is spend the next few minutes reviewing a few things that I hope you will find helpful. I'm going to take a slightly different approach than you might be used to. So just kind of hang in there with me. So we all know this next guy on our slide, Sir Isaac Newton, right? He gave us our first two laws of physics. An object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So guess what? Your new business, or your business that isn't growing the way that you'd like it to, or as fast as you think it should be, that's at rest. And it needs an enormous external force, and that means you and your effort to get things into motion. But in the real world, that will mean things like changing your daily life routines so that you have time to work on your business. It's not easy. This is a really, really hard process. And I'll say that a few times through the next 30 minutes. This is hard. And I will assure you it's probably harder than you think it's going to be, but it's not impossible. Most people that I know recognize that change will happen, but then we still remain averse to change itself. In my 34 years working with doctors, I've met a few who aren't really keen on change. Not saying that's any of you. You guys might be really just totally fine with changing processes and the way things work, but I have had the pleasure of working with a number of doctors who have no interest in changing and hold on very, very tightly to the way that they do things. Friends and family will have those same feelings. They may not be as quick to jump on this train with you as you think they should be. And it's different for them, and it disturbs the existing patterns and the rhythms that you guys have built your lives around, sometimes for decades. It's something that people are used to, and you want to sweep in and you want to change all of that. But if you're going to make it work, that business at rest is going to need that huge, huge push from you. So the next slide, even though it's probably a little corny, this is the time when I start to get excited as part of this presentation, because I experienced a real personal shift in the way that I view kind of my own purpose, if you will, probably about 15 years ago. And so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to share a really short story with you. So this is the whiteboard in my office. It's actually just sitting right behind me. And some of those things, the purpose over profit especially, have probably been on that whiteboard for about 4 years. Peter Drucker is attributed with the culture eat strategy for breakfast. It's another thing I've always kind of got in the back of my mind. The irrational confidence that I find in doctors who choose to take this step and make this journey, and that you have to have when you're taking this journey. And then up there in the right-hand corner, it says, remember who you are. So when I was growing up, this was something that my mother always said to me. When I got up and left to go to school in the morning, remember who you are, Jennifer. When I would leave to go to work, remember who you are, Jennifer. When I would go out at night, and it was especially when I went out at night, and a little more stern, remember who you are, Jennifer. And, as a teenager, I always nodded in agreement. I mean, it was just, okay, Mom, sure, whatever you say. I know who I am. I'll remember who I am. But the truth of the matter is, I really had no idea what she was talking about. Until 2006, I had been working in an academic setting for about 10 years, and I went to ASCRS in San Diego, and I was looking for a filler class before I went to a lab on LASIK. So I took a class on core values, and I sat in the front by choice because I thought, I don't know anything about this, and this is probably going to be something that's going to bore me to tears. And I was, for the first hour, completely lost and completely confused, because I had never at any time in my life taken a moment to figure out what my core values are or how they may impact how I walk through my day and how I make decisions. And by the end of the class, it changed the way that I thought about that statement my mother always said, remember who you are. All of a sudden, I got it, because I had spent some time really thinking about what that meant, what was my purpose. And if you ask my children, my son is 32 and my daughter is 22, they hear all the time from me, remember who you are. And I have at least provided them a little bit of insight about what that looks like. And I'm not going to have them wait until they're 40 to figure it out like I did. But it is something that has proven to be exceptionally valuable to me over the last 15 years, especially as I started to think about the differences between managing and leading. And we'll talk about that a little bit in one of the upcoming slides. So why does your why matter, right? We've all heard of Simon Sinek. He's made an awful lot of money on discovering your why. But here's what's kind of fun about it is that it's actually a thing. Like it really and truly resonates and makes a difference in the way that you walk through your day and in how you make decisions about this new practice. So we talked just a couple minutes ago about distractions and how easy it is to get distracted. So every time the Pantone color of the year is announced, I have people that will actually, doctors that will call and say, so I was looking at the Pantone color and it's made me wonder if my logo colors aren't right. Should I change it? And I inevitably will have a friend that says, I should just paint my walls. Isn't that a pretty color? I think this year is is it Very Berry, I believe. It's kind of a light lavender color with red undertones, if you will. So not only the distractions, but the repetition of the day can grind us down. And then we have those moments that day where we wake up and we can't entirely remember why it is we decided to do this in the first place. And if you spend any time on social media, I have noticed, and I'm not sure if you all have as well, a lot of people talking more about how they don't remember why they decided to do this and that it doesn't feel the same and that burnout is actually becoming a thing for them. So I'm finding, especially post-pandemic, if you will, that I'm hearing a lot more dissatisfaction when people are talking about their jobs. And with that being said, there is truly nothing more important to your success than understanding your why. It is not just the reason you do what you do. It is the consistent and constant reminder that keeps you and I grounded. It keeps us energized and it keeps us focused. It is at the very core of what you do. And it's what made you decide to take this step or to come tonight, because there's something more, something that kind of tugs at us on the inside that says, I can do this better. Or this doesn't really align with the way that I see myself practicing medicine for the next 20 years. I'm going to start thinking about another way to do that. And I find that with new practices in particular, they reach this emotional checkpoint is how I kind of refer to it at about 6 months after they open. I inevitably will get phone calls and I can time them where someone will call me and go, why did you let me do this? This was the dumbest idea ever. Like I'm not making any money. I'm not seeing any patients. Nothing's working. I don't know what I'm doing with my staff. This was the worst idea ever. And I tell them all the same thing. And it might sound silly in this moment, but I want you to find a place where no one else is around you. Plant your feet. Close your eyes if you have to. Take a deep breath and go back and remember why you decided to do this. Because it is that core value that's right here that drives us to get up every day, that drove us to make this decision, that will realign you, that will help you take that moment of panic and anxiety and uncertainty and turn it back around. And you will open your eyes, turn back around and go right back inside. And you're going to face the rest of your clinic. And it'll happen more than once. And it will happen when you least expect it. And every time it does, it will feel worse than the time before. And so holding on to that and knowing why you chose to do this in the first place. And you saw on my board, the purpose over profit. That's a really big thing for me. Oftentimes when I ask people why they've decided to do this, and I ask every single solitary person I talk to, it's part of our very first phone call. Why did you decide to step out into this risky space? There is uncertainty. You're going to spend less time with your family in the beginning. You're going to wear about 75 hats. You're going to go from being a doctor to a doctor and a manager and a parent and a spouse and a leader and an optician and a front desk person and everything in between. You're going to be a bookkeeper. You're going to be a plumber. You might even be a painter. You're going to be a janitor. I mean, all of a sudden on Monday morning, you have 75 new job titles that you didn't have on Friday afternoon when you left your other job. And you know, it's a lot. It's a lot to manage and a lot to take on. It is introducing you to parts and pieces of your life and your work world that you never probably imagined that you would see yourself in. And the challenge is all of those things have to happen. We have to step into all of those roles at least once or twice in the beginning. So the other thing to know is that if you leave here tonight and decide, this is crazy, I'm not doing this, this is not for me, that's okay. Being here doesn't mean you have to do this. And maybe if it's not for you right now, maybe it will be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. I have a friend who just is obsessed with yoga, just loves it. And she's incredible, just incredible. And I can't tell you how many times she and I have had the discussion where I've said, you should just be a yoga instructor. I mean, you're so good at it. You love it. You know, just go do it. And she always says, well, that's great. I don't want to teach anybody anything. Like, yoga is my time for quiet and I get to escape from everybody. I mean, the last thing I want to do is teach people. Like, that's my quiet time. And that's okay. You know, and I read an article not too long ago about an ophthalmologist who decided that she actually wasn't comfortable with people being so close to her face all day long and left private practice and went into academics. So we all have our own path, right? It's all part of that journey and that story. And what's right for you may not be right for somebody else. And conversely, what's right for them may not be right for you. And that's okay. Remember, we're not all going to go about this in the same way. But discovering your why and kind of getting a feel for what that looks like for you actually influences a lot of the decisions that you will make as you're opening your practice and as your practice is growing. So 4 of the key areas that you will find that this influences is your location, marketing, your patient base, and your staff. So we've all heard it said, location, location, location. It's the top thing that anybody tells you. What's the most important thing? Location, location, location. And a great location is absolutely critical as part of this process. There's no getting around it. But the right location, and remember, I didn't say a great location. I said the right location. The right location is more than just high visibility and foot traffic. It's more than great parking and good lighting. For some of you, especially coming straight out of school, the town that you choose to open in, the community that you choose to serve, may be where you put down roots. It might even be where you decide to raise a family. So your location and the potential profitability, you really need to think about balancing that, or at least finding some harmony with those other parts of your life that coexist with the work piece. Making a good income is amazing, right? It's what we all hope for, to be able to help, to be able to serve, to be able to make a great income. But when you make a great income, but you live somewhere that you're unhappy or you don't like, it's discouraging. And it may even cause you to struggle to get involved with your local chamber of commerce or the social opportunities that provides you, and can hurt your ability not only to grow professionally, but personally. And when you start thinking about the location, we can just kind of segue into kind of the marketing and patient arena. The one thing that I think is really important for you to remember And this is something that the big box stores will tell you as well. Your target customer is not everyone. That's not the right answer. And marketing to everyone will not increase your revenue. So as you're deciding what this is going to look like for you, again, knowing who you are and what type of practice you want to be. Is it going to be peds? Is it going to be dry eye? Do you really love the geriatric population? Maybe it's general optometry. But knowing that will help you guide your marketing and greatly assist your location search. So, for example, if you want to specialize in peds and you find a highly visible, great location right next door to a retirement community, the opportunity to increase awareness in the pediatric space is probably going to be a little more challenging to do. On the marketing side, if your ideal patient is part of the geriatric community and part of that retirement community, we're not really going to market to them on Instagram like we would the parents of peds. So know your audience, and knowing your audience happens when we know our why, because you know who your ideal patient base is, you know who it is that you want to see, you know who it is that you want to build your practice around. The last thing I will also say about this is don't be afraid of competition. I have people that will ask me all the time, well, there's another doctor's office a mile away. Competition is proof that this business model and this opening your own practice and going out on your own and doing this independently, it's proof that that business model works. So don't be afraid of that. Some of the next few slides might be tough for some of you to hear. You might think to yourself when I say them, well, that's not very nice. Or you may think, well, that's not true. I can assure you that as I was putting these slides together, I did it knowing that the only reason I felt solid in doing so is because of what I've seen and what I've watched and what I've heard over the course of the last 6 years working with new practices. So my apologies in advance. Number one, it's going to be hard to hear. Being a great optometrist just isn't enough. It's just not enough. There are approximately a gazillion other people in the world who do what you do. There's 100 of them that registered for this tonight in the state of California only. So there's a lot of you doing what you do, and there's a lot of you doing what you do really, really well. That's not enough. There's got to be more. And some people don't do things as well as you, and there are going to be some that do things better than you. So understand that what you do is not magical. Most successful businesses, quite frankly, are not unique. They're not even original. They usually have taken a proven idea and given it a little bit of a twist. It's not about reinventing the wheel, but you do have to figure out what makes you different. When I moved to California, why do I come see you, Dr. Chung, versus somebody else? What makes me want to see you versus someone else? What do you offer outside of, I'm a great doctor? I'm really kind of hoping all of you are great doctors. Otherwise we need to have a completely different conversation. So when you think about your practice, it's actually a really, really simple equation. So the magic is a combination. It is a combination of what you do, who you do it for, why you do it, and how you do it. And generally speaking, that's going to mean your patients will come back. They've had an awesome experience, and they're going to come back and see you year after year, and they're going to leave and they're going to tell all of their friends. And it's much easier and much more affordable to retain a current patient than it is to try to go find new ones. Now, as a new practice, you're going to see a lot of new patients. You really are. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. And this is a tough one. Because this is a pretty consistent conversation that I have during the first phone call. If you build it, they actually won't come. And I'm not saying no one will follow you. But I talk to a lot of folks who are kind of under the impression that everybody's coming along. And that's just not the case. I mean, truly, at least twice a day, someone will say, well, I have 10,000 patients right now, so I'm not worried about being too slow in the beginning. And to have to tell someone on our first phone call, that's not true, is really, really hard to do, but it's the truth. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, who knows? Most of our patients don't come to our practice because of us. Some do. I'm not saying they don't. But those are going to be patients who you have generally created some kind of emotional connection with. Maybe you've changed their lives. You've found, diabetes that they didn't know they had. You've been able to control their glaucoma. You were able to get them referred for cataract surgery. And that creates an emotion. And that's a different connection than function. Most people with healthy eyes in their 20s are just going to the doctor to get a refill on their contact lenses or a new glasses prescription. It's about function. It's not about, gosh, I really love that doctor. What's their name again? The one, I can't remember. Anyway, they're great. That's actually what, unfortunately, a lot of our patients, that's how they think of us, if you will, when they're thinking about their doctors. But they lead busy and they live chaotic lives in many cases, and function for them and convenience for them oftentimes outweighs the relationship they have with you. So they want to know things like, can I get there before work? Can I get it done on my lunch break? 2 miles further to come see you at your new practice in the city of Chicago might take you a half an hour. Now, if you're in a rural environment, that's completely different. So when you say it's just 2 miles, we've all sat in 2 miles worth of traffic for a really, really long time. And if you're trying to get an eye exam done on your lunch break, that extra 2 miles is no longer convenient. And so I will look for somebody else to see. Functionality, again, is a big thing for them. Can you solve my problem? You can? Great. But is there someone closer that can do that as well? Because that would be even better. So be realistic about how many of your patients are actually going to come see you at your new practice, even if it's just a mile away. There are some folks who will not step outside of their comfort zone and their convenience zone. And there's not a whole lot that you're going to do to change that. The other thing to consider is when we go back a slide or two and we talk about our ideal patient base, is every patient that you're seeing now your ideal patient? Do we want all of them to come with us to the new practice? That's not saying we won't see them, but are we building the practice around them? So there's a lot of little nuances in that if you build it, they won't come statement. So there are going to be some of you in the room, I know, are going to disagree with me on this, but it is the truth. Number 3, you are not a website designer. You are not a website designer, and you are not a website designer. And while I kind of focus on website because that seems to be the thing that most people will not invest in and do on their own, you're also not an accountant. You're not a bookkeeper. You are a doctor who invested a terrific amount of time and energy and money to become an expert at what you do. So when someone says to me, I'm going to do my own marketing, I'm going to build my own website, I'm not going to use Google because it doesn't work, I'm going to have all kinds of time to figure it out. And then I'm going to do bookkeeping too, so I can save money. My answers are always, please don't do your own marketing. Yes, Google does work. And no, you won't have enough time to do all of those things. And I will pose the question, would you ask your website designer to run in and do a quick refraction on the -12 that's in exam room 3? I'm going to say no. I'm just guessing. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to say no. Would you look at your accountant and ask them to go remove the foreign body that's in exam room 1? I'm saying no. And when I go back to social media, I see a lot of discussions within the industry about people not recognizing your expertise and not valuing what you have done and the time that you have invested. And we talk about being paid for our years of knowledge and our expertise, and not how long it took us to do the refraction or to do the task, if you will. So why wouldn't you apply that to the success of your business? Why would you create your own website when there are people out there who went to school to be website developers and marketing experts? And there are folks who have financial MBAs and all kinds of degrees in the area of finance for them to be the best accountant ever. Why would you not be willing to outsource some of those key elements? What I don't want you to do, don't scrimp in the name of now, because you will pay for it later. I can assure you. And by the way, Google does work. Just in the most recent HubSpot annual state of marketing report, 63% of people click on Google Ads. That's a pretty high number. The reason it doesn't work for some people is, one, they don't do it long enough and they don't do it correctly. And that's why you need to have somebody help you do those kinds of things. So please, I understand that you are spending a lot of money when you're first getting started. I get it. This is not an easy process, and you don't make a lot of money in the beginning. So we look for ways to save money. We look for ways to lower our cost of goods. That's not the spot. We have to have a website that pulls people in, that has the right kind of content and the right kind of information. You have to have someone that understands the numbers game, understands a P&L, understands how to help you understand those pieces of the business. So the next slide is, I guess for me, it's a little bit of a, it's my sore spot. So I apologize ahead of time for this one. My slide won't move. Hold on. Okay. It is not too soon to do anything, and you absolutely do need a handbook. I will start with, it's not too soon, because I could spend the rest of the night talking about the need for a handbook. What I generally hear is, I've only been open for 6 months. I mean, there's hardly any numbers to track. Or I only have 1 employee. Why would I need a handbook? So keep in mind, guys, this is the slowest you're ever going to be when you first open. In spite of all of the things that you're learning and how crazy it feels, it is the slowest you will ever be. So use the time wisely. Learning the business of running a business is not a one-time thing. We don't take 1 course and run back to the office and know everything. It changes as our practice changes. It's an ongoing process that grows as you do. And trust me when I say, when you dedicate defined time to work on the business side of the business, you will find greater joy working in the business. So start with good habits from the very, very beginning. When you have downtime, then tweak your plan. that you have for the practice. Visit neighboring businesses, network, talk about partnerships. Post something on social media that says, next person that comes in for an exam gets $25 off their glasses. Use production tracking software from day one. There are a lot of really great programs out there that track CPT codes that can tell you how many new patients you're seeing, how many follow-ups you're seeing, what your average revenue per patient is, how many glasses you're selling, how many annual contact lenses are you selling. Use those. They will cost you money, usually somewhere around $50 a month. You spend that a week at Starbucks. And the Starbucks might taste good, but it's not helping you improve your business. It might put you in a better mood for the time being, but it's not doing anything to drive revenue to the practice. It's not helping you identify those key metrics in the practice that are working and the ones where there are opportunities. And for goodness sake, create a handbook. Please create a handbook. I would love to see you have the handbook created before you even have your first employee. I don't care if you just have one. And this is going to sound a little harsh when I say this. It takes one person to light a match and create a complete disaster in our practice. Very rarely does a doctor call me and say, I have 15 people that I'm having trouble with. I'm having trouble with one person. This is something that I have a lot of concerns about with this one person. I've maybe in 35 years had someone come and say, it's a group of people that I have a real concern about in terms of behavior or something that needs to be elevated to a different kind of level. Handbooks create structure, and then they create guidance, and they create uniformity within the practice. In spite of what people tell you, people like instruction. They like to know what they're supposed to be doing. This is not an official document. It's not necessarily even going to hold up in court, but it gives you a foundation and something to fall back on. So when they look at you and say, oh, I didn't know I needed to be here at 8 o'clock. Well, sure you did. The hours are in the handbook and you actually signed it. So make sure that you have those key details. If you're interested in knowing kind of what are the must-haves in a handbook, I'm going to share my email at the end, and I'm happy to share some of those things with you as well. I won't create it for you, but I will tell you some of the things that will be useful for you. It does not need to read like Anna Karenina or War and Peace. And I think that's one of the things that keeps people from creating them in the beginning. It just gets too complicated. This is just tell me about your practice. Share your mission statement, your core values, what's your dress code, what are your hours, your paid time off. There are some things like harassment and discrimination policies that you really want to make sure that you have included. But generally speaking, it doesn't have to be complicated. So the next one, you may actually get at least the first part, but you may not have considered the second part. So we're going to hire for culture, and we are going to train for the role. And then as I explain that, it will kind of lead us into the second part. So when I say the job market right now is challenging, that's a bit of an understatement. And I think oftentimes what happens, especially in kind of this recession, inflation conversation that we have, is people get really excited that it's going to improve the job market, because what we typically find is that people don't hire at the rate that they have been, or you will even see people kind of preemptively lay staff off. The challenge with where we are right now is that even with that, there are still 2 job openings for every 1 person that's looking in our industry. That's makes things really, really complicated, and it puts the potential employee completely in control of the conversation. And sometimes, because we really, 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 really want to fill that position, and man, it would be great if I could fill it with somebody that I don't have to train and they could just come in and start working, we get backed into a corner on salary. We get backed into a corner around behavior and expectations. And it can be a really, really tough way to start your business. So in the amount of time it takes to find someone with all that experience that you're looking for, you could have hired and trained 3 people who didn't have the years, but more importantly, they align with your values and your culture. And that is far and away more important than bringing on an optician who has 25 years of experience. Because what I will tell you is that oftentimes when we come from a background that's that extensive, we come with our own ideas about how things should be done. And they often can be a direct conflict into what you're thinking you'd like to see for your practice. Now, that doesn't mean someone else's ideas shouldn't be heard, evaluated, taken into consideration, or maybe even implemented. But oftentimes there can be a rigidity in that can be very difficult for you to work with. They can also come with really bad habits. We don't always know how people have been trained. And I've had folks who have come in and said, I have 10 years of experience. And I think, in what? Because it certainly can't be in this based on the workup you just did. So when you hire people that don't have experience, but are more in alignment with your culture, it provides you a much greater opportunity to train them in the way that you want to see things done in your practice. Keep in mind that with a few exceptions, you can train most qualified people to do the jobs that need to be done. And whether or not someone can do the job is usually in their resume. So what you're trying to figure out in that interview is whether the human being sitting across from you is a good fit for your practice. That's going to be the most important piece for you to walk away from in that interview. Great employees generally all start off simply being good, but they need your guidance and your time and your mentorship along the way to achieve growth and become great. So don't be reluctant to make that investment. That investment doesn't have to be financial. It's largely going to be your time. It is exponentially worth it for you in the end to spend the time in the beginning with your staff, training them the way you want them to be trained, creating expectations, guidelines, boundaries, and creating an environment that they want to come to every day. And if those folks start struggling, the folks that you have trained start struggling with their job despite being objectively qualified, take the time to figure out the problem. And this is the hard part. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's the way we communicate. Sometimes it's the way that we direct that causes our staff, our team, to not develop the way that we think that they should. And oftentimes it never occurs to us that it might be something that we're doing. So be transparent when possible. If you've hired someone who you believe is unquestionably capable of the work and a good fit for the team, chances are there's something additional that's going on that has created this change in their performance at work. You have to be willing to invest the time with your staff. I also work in an operations space, and I will have doctors who will call me and schedule an hour of time to talk about what their staff isn't doing or how annoyed they are with the team. And I always ask the same question first. So what I'm hearing is that you'd rather talk to me about it for an hour than work with them for an hour and try to make changes. That's what I want you to do. I want you to hang up the phone and I want you to go and take that next 45 minutes and sit down and say, let's have a meeting and let's talk about this. Everything that you do in that practice for your patients, it's not just about you. It's the entire process, the entire, every person they touch and talk to is part of that patient experience. And so your team is as valuable, if not more valuable, believe it or not, than you are. So take the time to invest in them, please. I promise you it'll be worth it. So most of you know this, but it's worth saying. Managing is not the same as leading. It's totally different. But you can learn how to be both a good manager and a good leader. And there are going to be times that you're going to have to be one or the other, or both. So for those of you who don't have management experience, I always recommend taking, even if it's just a baseline management course or leadership course, just so that you can infuse yourself with thoughts and ideas that you may not have had before. Being or having a good manager is critical. But leadership and what it can do for your team, it's a total game changer. So just a few of the differences when you think about the two. Managers are typically going to be very geared by results. It's a title with job responsibilities. So those are the ones that will ask questions about how and when do you want it done? So they're about processes, direction, and execution. So oftentimes you might say to them, your manager, we need to increase the number of patients that are using premium lenses by 30% next quarter. And your manager will put those processes into place. She will work, or he will work, on keeping people accountable, providing direction and execution. On the other side, leaders come from more of an let me inspire you space. They will take that how and when and ask, well, what are we doing and why? They are a little more willing to challenge the status quo. They're more about analyzing and then assessing, as opposed to producing, if you will. And it's not that they don't understand that the producing is important, but leaders know how to motivate and know how to inspire and be creative and help others achieve those goals. So you will oftentimes, leaders will take a back seat, or you will see them working side by side with the rest of the team. And traditionally, it used to be that anytime someone had the title CEO, we just kind of automatically say, oh, they're the leader. A leader can be anyone in the organization. It's not a title. Oftentimes it's more of, if you will, a character trait or a personality trait. So it might be your front desk person who really has this just uncanny ability to lead the staff. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is not someone that has to have a management title to be a great leader. And sometimes leadership is one of those things that happens for a blip in that moment where someone steps up and says, I got this. And then it may be somebody else the next time. But it's a very, very different scenario, management and leadership. And I would encourage you to take a deeper dive into each of those as you continue down this process. So as we wrap up, I promised that I would have a couple of key websites and maybe even some homework assignments and bedtime reading for you on some of the last slides. So SCORE.org is an organization that I'm a huge fan of. I have no affiliation with it whatsoever. They do work pretty closely with the Small Business Association. I am routinely on SCORE. I sign up for their webinars. I go and I look at their blog postings. They have templates, they have checklists, they have mentors all over the United States that will work with you absolutely for free. It is completely volunteer-based in all different areas of business. They could be bankers, they could be lawyers, accountants, they might be other doctors, but they are there to help provide guidance and insight and support to you through this process. And I find it to be a tremendous wealth of information. As I had mentioned before, explore your local town or city's economic development department. And then I have added just a few books that I have found easy to read, easy to understand, and that I think that you will glean a few great pieces of advice from. The first one is Becoming an Optometry Boss, and it's by Dr. Bimal Patel. He actually has a practice in Houston that he opened, I'm going to say coming up on just about 5 years ago. Dr. Adam Ramsey is out of South Florida, and his book is entitled Play Chess, Not Checkers. Someone who's also been open, I'm going to say probably about 6 years now. The next book is one of my favorites. Some of you may have read it. If you've read it, read it again, because it can make a huge, huge difference to you as you're opening the practice. And that is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And also The Peter Principle by Lawrence Peter and Raymond Hall. So, take a picture of that slide, whatever works best for you. But I am also happy if you reach back out to me to provide you with that additional information. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you taking time out of your day and allowing me to share a little bit of what I do every day with you. If after your time this evening, you have additional questions, maybe you'd like to learn a little bit more about PECA and their resources, I am happy to connect with you and answer any questions that you might have. My email is there, jenny.wiley@peca.com. So with that being said, I did receive a couple of questions, and I'm happy to either just read some of the questions that I received from folks, or you can type them in the chat box, because I'm not sure if the folks who asked questions on the registration, I'm not sure if they're actually here or not. So there were 3 key ones that came up in all of the questions, and I will take a quick moment to review those. The most popular question was, should I join a buying group, alliance group, or have a consultant? I can't answer that question for you. I work for an alliance group, and so what I should be going is, yes, you should. And personally, I think you should, because it's a tremendous value and it's a tremendous resource. And this is a really, I'm going to say it again, really, really hard thing you're about to do. And it can be scary. And it can be overwhelming. And sometimes you can feel like you're on an island, but you're not. There are a ton of folks who are out there to help you and to support you. I like to think of myself when I work with new practices as kind of the co-pilot. I'm here to step in if something happens and you can't land the plane. I'm going to help provide direction to you and support and get you connected with the right members of my team to make sure that your questions can get answered, whether it's about finance or marketing or the optical. We didn't even touch on optical. I was afraid to get started on optical because we could be here all night. But there are so many things that you can gather from the alliance group and the buying group space, in addition to the savings and the rebates that we hear about so often. Consultants typically are going to be working on a much higher level. So it's going to be more of a, here's your playbook, go do that. Here are the things you need to do, go make it happen. They typically are also going to cost a lot more. I find consultants can be really good fits for folks who are just extremely uncomfortable and very, very unsure with just even the idea of taking that first step. And to be honest, it's not as many people as you think. Most that I talk to kind of come into it with a great amount of gusto and enthusiasm and irrational confidence, as I showed you on my whiteboard. Someone else asked, is it possible to succeed as a cash-only practice? Absolutely, it is. The most important thing that you need to remember is that you will, generally speaking, create more revenue per patient, but you won't have as many patients on your books in the beginning. So it's going to take longer to grow the practice that you are looking to have than it will if you're on a number of vision insurance plans. So when you understand that, though, in the beginning, and you plan for it in your projections and everything else that you're putting into play in order to get your doors open, if you stick to it and if you follow through, you absolutely can find success with that. I have an incredible, incredible new practice in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's one of my favorite doctors out there. And before his practice turned 3, he won InVision Magazine's 2021 Best optical retailer in America, and he doesn't take insurance. And it was before he turned 3. And his conviction and his stick-to-itiveness, he never, ever, ever wavered, right? It was his why. He knew it. He understood that it was going to take longer, but he had no interest in doing it differently. So it can be done, but just understand that there are some changes to that. And then lastly, I had someone who asked, how do you know when you're ready? You won't. I'm sure you were hoping for something much more profound than that. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no defined right or wrong time to take this leap, to take this step. Just do it. If it's something that nags at you and pulls at you and propels you to do it, do it. You can figure the rest of it out. Again, thank you guys so much. If you have any questions for me, feel free to shoot me an email. I appreciate everyone's time this evening. Good night.